The neon "Open 24/7" sign buzzed irritably as Marcus Chen dragged another bag of expired hot dogs toward the dumpster. 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, or technically Wednesday now, and here he was, living his best life. At 26, with a degree in comparative literature, gathering dust somewhere in his cramped studio apartment, this wasn't exactly where he'd planned to be. Could be worse, he muttered, his personal mantra these days. Could be working at an MLM like Steve. The Seattle rain drummed steadily on his baseball cap as he heaved the bag into the dumpster. That's when he heard it. A distinct rustling sound that wasn't rain, followed by what could only be described as a four-armed blue alien, trying and failing to catch herself as she tumbled out from behind a stack of cardboard boxes. Marcus blinked slowly. Aliens weren't exactly rare these days. Not since first contact 5 years ago. But they usually didn't go dumpster diving behind his store at 3 a.m., especially not Scricks. They were supposedly refugees from some war-torn system or another, but even the poorest ones typically had community support systems. This one looked absolutely miserable. Her blue skin had a distinctly greyish tinge. All 4 of her arms were wrapped around herself in what looked like a universal gesture of "I'm cold and everything sucks." And her clothes, while oddly well-made now that he looked closer, were soaking wet. "Hey," Marcus said, because what else do you say to a dumpster-diving alien? "You okay?" She startled, all 4 hands flying up in what he hoped was surrender and not preparation to shoot laser beams from her fingertips. Her large, silvery eyes blinked rapidly, all 3 of them. "I am doing the fine," she said in carefully enunciated English, simply engaging in traditional Earth activity of garbage assessment. Marcus couldn't help it. He snorted. "Garbage assessment? That's a new one." The alien's face flushed a deeper blue. "Is this not correct terminology? We usually call it dumpster diving," Marcus said, then immediately felt like a jerk for correcting someone who was clearly having a rough night. "Look, you want some coffee? It's pretty terrible, but it's hot." Her third eye widened slightly. "You would share beverage? With stranger? In garbage place?" "Well, when you put it that way, it does sound kind of sketchy," Marcus admitted. "But I'm on camera." He pointed to the security camera that hadn't actually worked since 2019. "And you look like you're having about as good a night as I am. I'm Marcus, by the way." She seemed to consider this, all 3 eyes blinking in sequence. "I am Kiki," she said finally, in a tone that suggested she'd just invented the name on the spot. "Cool, here." Marcus shrugged off his jacket with the store logo and held it out along with his umbrella. "You look freezing. But you will be wet." She tilted her head, causing water to drip from her silvery hair. "I live literally across the street," he said, "and like I said, could be worse." "Could be worse?" she repeated carefully, as if memorizing the phrase. "Yeah, like I could be working at an MLM like Steve." "What is Steve?" Marcus grinned despite himself. "Come on, I'll explain over coffee. And maybe one of those hot dogs I didn't throw out yet." As he led the way back to the store's side entrance, he could have sworn he heard her muttering something about fascinating social customs and exceeding preliminary parameters. But it was probably just the rain. The neon sign buzzed overhead as they stepped inside, its light catching the strange, almost crystalline pattern in the fabric of Kiki's supposedly ragged clothes. But Marcus was too busy explaining the concept of pyramid schemes to notice. Could be worse, he thought again. At least his overnight shift wouldn't be boring. He had no idea just how not boring things were about to get. Over the next few weeks, Kiki became as much a fixture of the store's graveyard shift as the perpetually flickering fluorescent light in aisle 3 and the mysterious stain by the refrigerators that Marcus swore was slowly developing sentience. "And this is called brain freeze?" Kiki asked one night, her ears literally steaming as she absorbed her 4th blue raspberry Slurpee through her auditory canals. "Fascinating. Though technically inaccurate, as it's more of a neural response to rapid temperature change in the—" She caught herself. "I mean, ouch. My thinking blob hurts." Marcus, who was restocking the beef jerky display, raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment. He'd started keeping a mental list of weird things about Kiki, and her occasional slips into what sounded suspiciously like advanced neuroscience were somewhere between pays for everything in perfectly preserved ancient coins and refers to his Toyota as a quaint combustion-based personal transport pod. Speaking of transport pods, I mean cars, Kiki said, as if reading his thoughts. Might I observe your vehicle's operational protocols again? You want to watch me drive home again, Marcus translated. It had become something of a ritual, him giving her a lift to the nearby alien shelter where she supposedly lived, even though he'd noticed she always walked in the opposite direction after getting out. If it wouldn't inconvenience you, she said, then added hastily, your dog. That's correct vernacular, yes? Maybe in 2005, Marcus muttered, then louder, sure, but you've got to stop trying to tip me for it. Especially not with coins that museums keep calling about. But the customary gratuity for transportation services is 15.7777%. She produced what looked suspiciously like a solid gold denarius. I checked multiple Earth databases. Pretty sure you're thinking of restaurants, Marcus said, and I'm also pretty sure you're using some very loose definition of Earth databases. Kiki's middle eye blinked rapidly, something Marcus had come to recognize as her oops, almost broke character tell. I simply wish to show appreciation for your... She paused, consulted something that looked like a holographic notepad before quickly hiding it. Sick rides, homie. Marcus pinched the bridge of his nose. Please stop getting your slang from whatever you're using. I'm begging you. The drive home was its usual exercise in surreal conversation. Kiki insisted on documenting everything, from the way Marcus had to jiggle the key just right to get the engine to turn over, to the mysterious check engine light that had been on since he bought the car. And this monitoring system, she said, pointing to the light, it perpetually advises engine verification, yet you ignore it. That's the American way, Marcus said. If you ignore a problem long enough, it either goes away or becomes so catastrophic you can't ignore it anymore. Fascinating, Kiki murmured, and he definitely saw her taking notes this time, though the notepad disappeared when she noticed him looking. And this is common practice among your species? Only the broke ones, Marcus said cheerfully. Speaking of which, that's definitely not a standard issue refugee shelter outfit you're wearing. Kiki's clothes, despite supposedly being her only possessions, seemed to repel dirt and water. They also occasionally shifted colors when she thought no one was looking. Oh, this is, standard issue, very standard. Much issue, many standard. She was starting to panic blend languages again. Look, a primitive avian transportation vehicle. That's a pigeon, and you're changing the subject. I would never... She stopped mid-sentence, head tilted as if listening to something. I mean, I must return to my totally normal refugee dwelling now for normal refugee things, like being refugeed. Before Marcus could point out that refugeed wasn't a word, she was out of the car and speed walking away, in once again the opposite direction from the shelter. The next morning, Marcus found his car working perfectly for the first time in years. The check engine light was off. The mysterious rattle was gone, and somehow his gas tank was full, despite being nearly empty the night before. Huh, he said, staring at the dashboard. That's new. When he checked his receipt from filling up the tank last week, he noticed Kiki's tip had been exactly 15.777%, down to the 10th of a cent. Just like every other time she'd paid for anything. He was starting to suspect there was something slightly odd about his new alien friend. The final straw came a few days later when he caught her having what appeared to be a very heated argument with his car's radio, in at least 3 different languages, none of them from Earth. Look, he said, causing her to jump guiltily. I feel like there's something you're not telling me. What? No, I am simply a normal Zakrix refugee. Doing normal refugee things, like... She consulted her hidden notepad again. Pulling oneself up by one's bootstraps, although I must note that particular idiom appears physically impossible and potentially dangerous. She was saved from further explanation by the arrival of 2 very official-looking black SUVs in the parking lot. Oh dear, she said in perfect Queen's English, then quickly added in her usual broken speech, I mean, oh no, how unfortunate. Look, another sky rat. This time, Marcus didn't even bother looking for the non-existent pigeon. Things were about to get interesting. Could be worse, he thought automatically. At least it wasn't an MLM. The men in black suits started appearing about the same time Marcus's hot dog roller achieved the impossible, a perfect health inspection score. This was particularly impressive considering the roller had been running continuously since 2018, and the last time someone had cleaned behind it, they'd found a receipt from 1997. Fascinating specimen, the health inspector had said, adjusting his suspiciously reflective sunglasses as he examined the roller. I mean, perfectly up to code. Carry on, citizen? Marcus could have sworn the man had 3 fingers on each hand, but he'd been working doubles that week, so who could say? Just checking, said the first suit-wearing customer later that night, flashing a badge that definitely wasn't FBI, unless the FBI had started using holographic credentials. You haven't noticed any unusual activity, mysterious figures, royalty in disguise? Sir, this is a convenience store in Seattle, Marcus replied, barely looking up from his crossword. The only unusual activity is when someone actually uses cash instead of their phone. And this. The man consulted a notepad that looked suspiciously like Kiki's. Slurpee machine. It's not being used for any unauthorized dimensional portals. Only to the dimension of brain freeze, Marcus said. Look, are you going to buy something? Because I need to restock the definitely up-to-code hot dogs. The man left, but others followed. They always wore sunglasses even at night and asked increasingly bizarre questions about everything from Marcus's Toyota. Has it achieved sentience yet? To the store's coffee machine, any signs of it developing faster than light capabilities? Meanwhile, Marcus's car had apparently decided to break the laws of physics. Not only had the check engine light stayed off, but he hadn't needed to fill up the tank in 3 weeks. According to his calculations, he was getting about 200 miles per gallon, which would have been more impressive if he hadn't caught Kiki whispering sweet nothings to his fuel tank in what sounded like binary code. Just practicing Earth numbers, she'd claimed when he caught her. Many numbers. Such math. Wow. Please stop getting your English from 2010 memes, he'd replied. But he couldn't help noticing that his car now purred like a kitten and occasionally played songs that definitely weren't on any Earth radio station. The security cameras were another matter entirely. Despite being broken for years, they'd suddenly started working perfectly, except whenever Kiki visited. Then they'd display nothing but static and what looked suspiciously like cat videos from space. Must be solar flares, Kiki suggested one night, while all 4 of her arms were occupied with trying to figure out how to eat a Twinkie. Very common this time of Earth rotation cycle. Uh-huh, Marcus said, watching as she somehow managed to get cream filling in one of her ears. And I suppose solar flares also accidentally paid off my student loans. Kiki choked on the Twinkie. What a fortunate clerical error that must have been, she said in perfect BBC English, then immediately slapped all 4 hands over her mouth. I mean, such luck, many fortune, very accident. Right, Marcus said slowly, just like how my car now runs on what I'm pretty sure is fusion power, and the health inspector turned out to have 3 fingers and a tendency to scan things with his sunglasses. Correlation does not imply causation, Kiki blurted out. Then quickly added, I mean, look, a sky rat eating another sky rat. That's a seagull eating a pizza, and you're changing the subject again. Before Kiki could respond, another suit-wearing figure entered the store. This one was trying very hard to appear human while being at least 7 feet tall and slightly translucent. Greetings, retail service human, the figure boomed. I am here to purchase your finest. What is word? Ah yes, beef jerky, like normal Earth person. Kiki made a sound like a computer blue screening. Oh, for the love of Gerald, we talked about this, she hissed, in that perfect British accent again. You're supposed to be inconspicuous. Ah yes, much inconspicuous, such normal. Gerald attempted to lean casually against the counter and phased slightly through it instead. How about that local sports team, fellow human? Did you see that ludicrous display last night? Marcus watched as Kiki face-palmed with all four hands. "Gerald," she said with forced calm, "please return to the— please leave the store before—" She was interrupted by the arrival of three more suits, these ones wearing sunglasses that definitely hadn't been designed for human faces. "Your valued customer," one of them started, before noticing Marcus. "Oh. Oh dear. Indeed," said another, "most unfortunate. Should we initiate memory modification protocols?" "You will do no such thing," Kiki snapped, then caught herself. "I mean, pleased to be leaving now? Many thanks. Such goodbye?" Marcus looked between Kiki, the translucent Gerald, who was still trying to figure out how to pick up beef jerky without his hands passing through it, and the three suits with their exotic sunglasses. "You know," he said conversationally, "when I took this job, the weirdest thing I expected to deal with was the occasional shoplifter. Not whatever this is." "I can explain," Kiki said desperately. "It's all a perfectly normal—" She was cut off by the sudden appearance of several more black SUVs in the parking lot, their engines humming in a way that suggested they ran on something far more exotic than gasoline. "Oh, splendid," Kiki muttered in her BBC accent. "The cavalry's arrived. Gerald, do stop trying to eat the beef jerky through your forehead." Marcus watched as Gerald sheepishly pulled his head out of the beef jerky display. "Just to be clear," he said, "this isn't going to end with me getting neuralized like in Men in Black, right?" "Don't be ridiculous," Kiki said absently, watching as more suits piled out of the SUVs. "That technology is highly unreliable. Besides, the paperwork for memory modification is absolutely dreadful." She seemed to realize what she'd said a moment too late. What is this Men in Black of which you speak? Is it perhaps about fashion choices in Earth's funeral customs?" Marcus looked at his perfectly functioning car through the window, thought about his mysteriously vanished student loans, and considered the fact that his store's hot dog roller had just passed a health inspection for the first time in recorded history. "Kiki," he said slowly, "I think it's time we had a talk about who you really are." "I am being just simple refugee," she protested, but her heart wasn't in it anymore. Even Gerald looked embarrassed, or as embarrassed as a semi-transparent 7-foot-tall being could look while wearing sunglasses clearly designed for someone with 4 eyes. That's when the front door burst open, revealing what appeared to be an entire platoon of very official-looking aliens in very expensive suits. "Your Royal Highness," one of them said, bowing deeply to Kiki, "we really must insist." "Oh, bloody hell," Kiki said in full British aristocrat mode. "Marcus, I don't suppose you'd believe they're practicing for a particularly elaborate costume party?" Marcus looked at his newly perfect car again, then at the health inspection certificate, then at Gerald, who had finally managed to grasp a piece of beef jerky and was looking inordinately proud of himself. "Could be worse," he said with a shrug. "You could be trying to sell me essential oils like Steve." "I still don't understand this Steve reference," Kiki muttered, then straightened up to her full height, which somehow seemed more impressive than before. "Oh, very well. I suppose the experiment was bound to end eventually." "Experiment?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Yes, well—" Kiki adjusted her supposedly ragged clothes, which suddenly looked a lot more like royal attire. "About that." "So," Marcus said, leaning against the counter as Kiki pretended to be deeply fascinated by a rack of potato chips, "want to explain why there's a fleet of what I'm pretty sure are diplomatic vehicles outside my store?" "Fleet? I see no fleet, only normal Earth transportation pods." Kiki's middle eye was blinking rapidly again as she picked up a quantum physics textbook from her bag. "I am simply doing the normal refugee activity of studying." "Your book is upside down." "Is Earth custom, very traditional, many learning. It's also in 17 dimensions," Marcus pointed out. "The pages keep folding into themselves." Kiki glanced down at the book, which was indeed creating small ripples in space-time. "Ah, would you believe it's a pop-up book? A pop-up book that's making my phone calculate the meaning of life." She looked at his phone, which was now displaying 42 in what appeared to be living fractals. "Yes?" Marcus sighed and started ticking points off on his fingers. "My car runs on what I'm pretty sure is starlight now. The health inspector had 3 fingers and scanned things with his sunglasses. Gerald is still stuck in the beef jerky display. Hello, came Gerald's muffled voice from aisle 3. And every time you get stressed, you sound like you just stepped out of Downton Abbey. I'm sure I don't know what you mean, Kiki said in perfect Queen's English, then immediately clapped all 4 hands over her mouth. I mean, such confusion, very mystery. Also, Marcus continued, there's the small matter of my student loans disappearing, my car insurance somehow covering damage from temporal anomalies, and the fact that your supposedly worn-out clothes just transformed into something that looks suspiciously like formal wear. Kiki glanced down at her outfit, which had indeed started shifting into an elaborate suit made of what appeared to be living crystal and light. Would you believe this is standard refugee attire? About as much as I believe Gerald is a normal customer. I am much normal, Gerald called out, now somehow even more tangled in the beef jerky display. Such human. Very Earth. Kiki let out a very un-refugee-like groan of frustration. This is precisely why we can't send Gerald on undercover missions anymore. Look, Marcus, I can explain everything. The store's door chimed, and suddenly the place was full of those not-quite-human agents in black suits. Their sunglasses gleamed with otherworldly light, and their badges seemed to exist in several dimensions at once. Your Royal Highness, one of them said, bowing deeply to Kiki, the situation has become untenable. The High Council requires your immediate return to— Oh, do shut up, Cornelius, Kiki snapped in full aristocrat mode. Then, realizing what she'd done, she added weakly, I mean, what is this royal of which you speak? I am being simple refugee, with simple refugee things like— She glanced at her quantum physics book, which was now teaching Marcus's phone the secrets of faster-than-light travel. Simple refugee quantum mechanics? That's when another group burst in through the back door, these ones wearing what looked like ceremonial armor made of pure energy. Princess Kikirax, their leader, called out, your father demands— Oh, for heaven's sake! Kiki threw up all 4 hands in exasperation. In that moment, her entire appearance seemed to shimmer, the facade of a bedraggled refugee melting away to reveal something far more regal. Her clothes completed their transformation into a suit that seemed to be made of starlight and protocol itself. Before Marcus could process this, she had moved with inhuman speed to push him behind her, taking up a protective stance that somehow made her seem 10 feet tall despite her actual height of barely 5 feet. Right then, she said, dropping all pretense of broken English. I suppose we're doing this now. Doing what exactly? Marcus asked, peering around her at the growing crowd of increasingly otherworldly beings filling his store. Well, Kiki, or Princess Kikirax apparently, said with a slightly sheepish grin, Would you believe I'm not actually a refugee? You don't say, Marcus deadpanned, as Gerald finally phased completely through the beef jerky display with a triumphant much success. So, Princess Kikirax said, straightening her starlight suit while simultaneously typing something in mid-air with her other 3 hands, I suppose I should start by mentioning that I'm actually the heir to the largest trading federation in the known galaxy. Neat, Marcus replied, because really, what else do you say to that? Does this mean I can get a discount on intergalactic shipping? Kikirax stared at him for a moment, then burst out laughing. See, this, she exclaimed to her guards, gesturing enthusiastically with all 4 arms. This is exactly why I chose him. Faced with a revelation that his entire worldview should be shattered, he asks about shipping rates. Your Highness, one of the guards said stiffly, perhaps we should focus on the security breach. Oh, do lighten up, Cornelius. This is absolutely fascinating data for my thesis. Thesis? Marcus raised an eyebrow. Yes, well, Kikirax had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I'm doing my doctoral research in xenosociology at the Grand Imperial University. My topic is authentic human interactions in high-stress retail environments, a study in adaptive social dynamics, or, as my advisor insisted on subtitling it, why Earth's convenience store workers are either the most evolved or most insane beings in the galaxy. Probably both, Marcus said thoughtfully. So all this was research? Initially, yes. You see, we discovered your planet's Yelp system. Primitive but fascinating, and I noticed something odd. Your kindness ratings were statistically improbable for someone in retail. 3 standard deviations above the mean. During overnight shifts, no less. I just try not to be a jerk to people, Marcus shrugged, even when they're actually alien princesses apparently studying me for their homework. That's exactly it. Kikirax's middle eye lit up literally. Even now, you're taking this all in stride. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Most species would be having existential crises by now. I work retail, Marcus deadpanned. My existential crisis had an existential crisis last year. Gerald, who had finally untangled himself from the beef jerky display, nodded sagely. Much wisdom, such perspective. The guards weren't supposed to be quite so obvious, Kikirax continued, shooting a look at her security detail. They were meant to maintain discreet surveillance while I conducted my field research. Your Highness, one of the guards protested, we were very subtle. Cornelius, you tried to blend in by wearing a t-shirt that literally said definitely not a royal guard on it. It was very convincing, Cornelius insisted. I even added the Earth custom of a baseball capturing device on my head. It was a colander, Cornelius. Marcus looked between them. So, the health inspector? Ah yes, Kikirax winced. That was actually our chief of xenotechnology. He got a bit carried away with the improvements to your equipment, though I must say that hot dog roller was a fascinating example of Earth's resilience. We're still not entirely sure how it was functioning without violating the laws of thermodynamics. And my car? Minor upgrades, barely noticeable really. Just a small fusion drive, quantum stabilizers, and a basic AI. Though I think the AI might have developed a crush on your audio system. That explained why his radio kept playing love songs in binary code. The student loans. Oh, that was just good business. Kikirax waved one hand while continuing to type with the others. The Zakrix Empire bought Earth's entire student debt system last month. Terrible investment, really. Had to write most of it off. Such a shame. She winked all 3 eyes somehow. Marcus looked around his store, now filled with otherworldly beings in various states of trying and failing to appear human. Gerald was attempting to pay for his beef jerky with what appeared to be a small star. Cornelius was still wearing his colander hat. The hot dog roller hummed with possibly illegal levels of quantum energy. You know, he said finally, this actually explains a lot about my performance reviews. My manager kept asking how I maintained such high customer satisfaction scores with beings from beyond space and time. Yes, well, Kikirax grinned, wait until you see the Intergalactic retail satisfaction surveys. 6 months later, Marcus found himself standing in front of a class of intergalactic dignitaries, holding up a slightly freezer-burned burrito with all the gravitas of a professor presenting a doctoral thesis. The key, he explained seriously, is to wrap it in a paper towel first. This is sacred Earth wisdom, passed down through generations of midnight shift workers. In the front row, Kikirax was taking eager notes while simultaneously recording the session, monitoring the room's quantum stability, and trying to prevent Gerald from eating the demonstration microwave. Again. But why not simply molecular reconstruct the frozen proteins? Asked a being who appeared to be made entirely of living crystal. Because then it wouldn't be a proper convenience store experience, Marcus explained patiently. The slight uncertainty about food safety is part of the ambience. Their flagship store on Alpha Centauri had become an overnight sensation. Turns out there was a huge market for what Kikirax called authentic Earth retail experiences across the galaxy. Their hot dogs, still powered by the mysteriously immortal roller from Seattle, had become a delicacy among the galaxy's elite, who found the concept of meat of uncertain origin thrillingly exotic. And this is why the coffee must be slightly burnt, asked another royal, their tentacles wrapped around a styrofoam cup. Exactly. If it tastes too good, people will get suspicious. At her desk, Kikirax beamed with pride. Her thesis on human retail psychology had revolutionized intergalactic commerce theory. There was already talk of a Nobel Prize once Earth officially joined the Galactic Federation. But what about the Slurpee phenomenon? called out a gaseous being who had to wear a containment suit to maintain human form. Our scientists still cannot explain how such a primitive mixture of frozen sugar water can produce such profound neurological effects. Brain freeze remains one of humanity's greatest contributions to galactic culture, Kiki chimed in. Though please remember to only absorb it through approved orifices this time. We're still renovating the store on Proxima B after last week's incident. Marcus demonstrated the proper microwave technique, complete with the traditional, "Is it hot enough?" dance of poking the burrito and then shaking burnt fingers. The assembled royalty took detailed notes, their various appendages scribbling furiously. Remember, he concluded, the true art of Earth convenience store cuisine lies in achieving the perfect balance between probably fine and legally defensible. Profound, whispered Gerald, who had finally been promoted from undercover work to official taste tester, largely because he could safely consume things that would violate several laws of physics. After the class, Kiki approached Marcus with all 4 arms full of data tablets. "The franchise is expanding faster than we predicted," she said excitedly. "We've got waiting lists from 17 different star systems. Though we might need to explain again that the health inspection scores aren't supposed to be perfect." "Could be worse," Marcus grinned. "At least we're not running an intergalactic MLM like Steve." "You still haven't explained who this Steve is," Kiki noted, her middle eye narrowing suspiciously. "Some mysteries of human culture must remain sacred," Marcus said solemnly, then ducked as a paper towel-wrapped burrito went flying across the room, propelled by someone's over-enthusiastic attempt at microwave mastery. "Speaking of mysteries," Kiki said, watching as Gerald helpfully caught the burrito with his partially phased head. "Your old Toyota has apparently achieved consciousness and is demanding employee benefits." "Yeah, that tracks." Marcus nodded. "Did you explain about the health insurance waiting period?" "It's currently organizing a union of sentient vehicles, something about better working conditions for transformed transport pods everywhere." Marcus watched as the assembled galactic royalty attempted to master the art of the proper convenience store lean. That specific way of propping oneself against a counter that suggested both "I've been here for 12 hours" and "I know exactly where the good snacks are hidden." "You know," he said, "when I was getting my comparative literature degree, I never imagined I'd end up teaching alien aristocrats how to properly microwave frozen burritos." "Disappointed?" Kiki asked, already knowing the answer. "Nah," Marcus grinned as Gerald finally figured out how to eat a burrito without it passing through his semi-corporeal form. "Could be worse. Could be working at an MLM like Steve." Somewhere across the galaxy, a Toyota Corolla powered by Starlight began drafting its first collective bargaining agreement, while the most mysterious hot dog roller in human history continued its eternal vigil, now serving questionable meat products to beings from 1,000 worlds. Just another day in intergalactic retail.